The Autumn of Fear, as it has been coined, was a terrifying couple of months when a horrific serial killer murdered at least 5 innocent women. The name we give the suspect now is Jack the Ripper, but a new theory has come to light, a theory that might just make sense. One that replaces Jack's name with one of a famous artist, whose name is Edgar Degas.
I'm not, kid you not, there were 2 birds that latched their little talons onto, like Spider-Man, onto the screen of the window and were like pecking at it and stuff. And they kept doing it. I think they like freaked out and was like, jumped off the bed and was like trying to attack them, I guess.
Yeah.
But I've never seen birds do that in my life.
So there was a screen door and then I'm assuming a glass door?
Yeah.
Were they robins?
No, they're like little brown things.
Then I don't have an answer for what they did that for.
Okay.
Robins will attack their own reflections. So like I'll be at work every once in a while and like a male robin will just be like flitting up and down, like face pressed against the glass, trying to like kick and punch and scratch the window because he sees his own reflection.
It has to be the same thing. It has to.
And
it was freaky.
I looked up online, like the only ways that you can stop it is like if you like put like dry erase marker, if you like make a grid to try and break up the reflective surfaces so the bird can easily more distinguish that it's not just like a full image or something. There's like an entire thing you can read on a website where it's like how to get robins to stop attacking your windows.
Oh, that's kind of sad.
They see themselves and get so mad. They're like, this is my neighborhood. And he's just attacking himself.
But yeah, it was a nice morning and then...
Deadly birds.
Deadly birds.
Just sitting there.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Kendra's literal worst nightmare to wake up to.
I know. Never watch the... If you haven't, never watch The Birds, ever.
I've seen it.
There was only one sequence in that movie that was actually scary. Just one.
Was it when they're real?
No,
it's the real birds?
It's when the lady finds the dead farmer, like the first like victim that you see. That sequence, there's like no music. It looks like an A24 film. Like all these just like long cut off shots of the house. She goes in and sees like the carnage of all the birds having flown in through the windows and sees the now eyeless farmer and runs out. But there's like no music. There's like nothing. And I was like, that was creepy. The rest of it, it's a bunch of like rear screen projections that are just like, okay.
Yeah. I just hate like when they're like boarding up everything. Cause I'm like, just because I know like what they're trying to get in and stuff. I hate that.
The book has a less satisfying ending than the movie.
It's a book?
Yeah, you didn't read the book?
Of
The book
the
ends
birds?
like the book
No,
ends
I didn't know it
with
was a
them
book.
just the book ends with them just holed up in the house at night.
Yep.
Trying to survive. The movie actually ends with them like driving off to like you don't know what happens. Like, did they make it? But like the book,
like they got away kind of thing. Yeah, the book is really messed up, and I think I had nightmares from that.
I didn't know it was a book. I thought, what's his face? Alfred Hitchcock actually had an imagination. I didn't know it was not a book.
Nope. It was just a scary book I had to read for English class.
Time for Edgar Degas.
Edgar! Yeah!
Get hype for Edgar, baby!
Oh, talking about killer birds and Kendra's worst nightmare? Heck yeah. Now we're going into another one of her, like, favorite people. We're gonna turn not so great.
This is the scariest episode specifically for Kendra. It's like we're going to talk about really brutal murders, we're going to talk about birds, and then we're going to blame it all on Ballerina Man.
Uh-huh. Just shaking your head.
Incensed.
Angry.
Throw him in jail immediately.
Hey Wanderers, welcome back to another Foolish Wanderers podcast, the podcast about anything and everything. Welcome back to Spooktober 2024, the final episode of Spooktober 2024. We're doing a part 2 of how Edgar Degas might be Jack the Ripper, and we are here with Max again.
I'm back again. You can't get rid of me.
Woo! Woo! Do you want to plug your like socials and stuff again real quick?
Plug.
All right, hold on. Here we go. All right, here we go. Okay. On YouTube, I am Max Chivington, MaxChivington. I have a gaming channel called The Star Munchers. All one word, it's exactly how it sounds. On Instagram, I'm Max_K_draws. And my podcast, Morphing Tower Podcast, is on most major podcast streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Music, etc. And that's where you can find me.
Woo!
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 Very concise. Beautiful. I love it. All right. So now we're going to get into the Edgar Degas side of the Jack the Ripper case. This podcast series, this mini-series that we're doing, is based off of a TikTok by Kiki Schirr that I found a couple months back. And her thoughts of why Edgar Degas is Jack the Ripper. So now we're going to get into Degas, his life. So I wrote down a lot. I don't know how in-depth you guys want to get with his life. I know Kendra is a big fan of Degas. I personally only really know him of painting ballerinas. Kendra got very offended last time.
I'm not offended. I just thought it was funny that like I don't know, like a person that's so like becomes so accomplished in life, like anybody really, like somebody that becomes so accomplished in life, like basically when they die, time moves on, or even when they're alive, they just are known for just like a blippet of what they're have. I think it's funny.
Yeah, it is. And his is paintings of ballerinas and other women.
I personally think that Kendra's sponsored by Big Degas. I think she's a plant.
I am a plant.
Kendra, get out. Okay.
I'm here to clear his name.
Okay.
For ridiculous.
I love this angle.
I'm here to clear his name for this ridiculous accusation from Kiki.
Yeah, Kiki Schirr. Yeah. You should check out her TikTok. I'll leave it in a link in your description.
Next week, she'll tell us all about how Elvis is really Bigfoot.
You know?
Didn't you know that Elvis was seen in Oregon once?
One time? There is like a theory that he's still alive.
I've heard that one too.
He's Bigfoot.
Yeah, he's Bigfoot, don't you know?
Yeah.
He's traded in the pompadour for full body hair.
For Bigfoot. For big feet.
Big feet.
Big feet. All right. So Degas was born Hilliard Germain Edgar, and then originally they spelled their last name D-E space G-A-S, and then he changed it later on. In July 19th, 1834. He was born in Paris, France, to his father Augusta, who was a banker, and his mother Celestine, who was an American from New Orleans. The family were members of the middle class with nobler presentations. And fun fact, for many years, the Degas family spelled their name, like I said, there's the D-E lowercase space capital G-A-S, and then the preposition D-E suggesting a land-owning aristocratic background, which they actually didn't have. So at around the age 11, Edgar started spelling his name Degas as all one word. So it's G-E-G-A-S. So all one word, and that's how he kept it ever since. So Degas always remained a proud Parisian, living and working in the same area of the city throughout his career. Though detailed knowledge of his middle-class family is limited, it is known that they maintained the outward forms of polite society and that they were related to minor aristocracy in Italy and to the business community in New Orleans, Louisiana, in the U.S. The family was also wealthy enough to send Degas in 1845 to a leading boys' school, Lycée Louis le Grand, where he received a conventional classical education. Music featured prominently in the Degas home, where the artist's mother sang opera arias, and his father arranged occasional recitals, one of which is represented in Degas' painting so he made this in 1871. It's called Lorenzo Pagans and Augusta Degas, and it's basically just like his father. I believe he's playing a guitar, just chilling in like their living room. It's kind of cool. Degas' mother died when he was just 13 years old, leaving 3 sons and 2 daughters to be brought up by their father, who was a banker by profession. Knowledgeable about art but conservative in his preferences, Degas' father helped to develop his son's interest in painting, and in 1855 encouraged him to register at the École des Beaux-Arts. Forgive me, I am not French. The pieces of his that we still have from this period show Degas' aptitude for drawing and his attention to the historical credences he viewed at the Louvre. He also began his first solemn explorations of the self-portrait. So in 1856, Degas surprisingly abandoned his studies in Paris, using his father's funds to embark on a 3-year period of travel and study in Italy, where he immersed himself in painting and sculpture of antiquity, the Trecento, and Renaissance.
And he really, really likes like frescoes. That's where he takes a lot of his inspiration from.
Yeah. So, staying first with relatives in Naples, he later worked in Rome and Florence, filling notebooks with sketches of faces, historic buildings, and the landscape, and with hundreds of rapid pencils copies from frescoes and oil paintings he admired.
Okay.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
I told you she was sponsored by Big Degas.
She is. I think she should be doing this part of the podcast. Just from memory. Yo. So among these copies are after Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and Titian, artists who were to echo through his compositions for decades. The same sketchbooks include written notes and reflections, as well as drafts for his own figure-based paintings and a variety of eclectic styles. Together they suggest a literate and serious young artist with high ambitions, but one that still lacked a direction. So he returned to Paris in April of 1859, and Degas attempted to launch himself through the established art world channels of the day, with little success. So Degas' transition from modern subject matter was a long and gradual one, not such an overnight conversion. Before he left Italy, he had made drawings of street characters and paintings of fashionable horse riders, but always on a small scale. When he met Manet in 1862, Degas developed an affectionate but pointed rivalry with the slightly older man. Degas' notebooks from these years were teeming with contrary possibilities for the direction of his art, as sketches of the countryside follow glimpses of theatrical performances and studies from objects in the Louvre are dispersed among images of tropical caricatures. So halfway through the decade, he abandoned historical themes, sending a portrait of a current ballet star at the Paris Opera, Eugenia Fioc. Like most of the future Impressionists, Degas lightened his palette and adopted more abrupt, simplified compositions during the 1870s, partly under the influence of Japanese prints, which is another one of Kendra's favorite arts. She nods agreeingly. Which were very popular among contemporary artists, but unlike his colleagues who were experimenting with painting en plein air, which means in the open air, it refers to the practice of painting outdoors, capturing the subject in real time and without the use of photographic references. Degas had a disdain toward the improvised outdoor landscape studies for which many of the Impressionists became known. Degas gained a lot of self-confidence in this time, boosted by the first signs of public recognition, and you can see this through his letters that he wrote and a range of his technical accomplishment. The early 1870s were critical in defining Degas' personal and artistic trajectory. Between 1870 and 1874, he painted a pioneering group of ballet rehearsal and performance scenes, such as the ballet class of 1873 through 76, finding eager buyers for many of them and soon becoming identified with their theme, which is how I know him. The dance followed Degas to test his skills in a daring new context. The world of the Paris Opera was surrounded by sexual intrigue as well as high glamour and had previously been the main topic of popular illustrators. Degas built on his knowledge of past art, but he cleverly directed it at audiences of his own day. In his choice of subject matter, his views of backstage activity were conspicuously casual and occasionally scandalous. In 1874, he was one of the leading organizers of the first impressional exhibition, which he called a Salon of Realists, showing his signature repertoire of dancers, horse races, and women ironing. And I believe he started this like Salon of Realists with Manet, the guy that he was kind of like in a slight rivalry with. I believe they worked together to kind of form this exhibition thing. So unfortunately, these developments in Degas' career coincided with or followed the terrible months of the Franco-German War, when Paris was besieged and Degas and several of his colleagues enlisted in the National Guard to defend the city. Escaping the worst of the horrors of the Commune of Paris, Degas left in 1872 for a protracted visit to his relatives in New Orleans, where he then pursued his experiments in family portraiture on spectacular works such as the Cotton Office in New Orleans in 1873. Over this time period, he began to describe a deterioration in his eyesight, complaining of intolerance to bright light and wondering if he might soon be blind. And this leads us to the first connection that Kiki Schirr had made in her TikTok. So with modern technology, scientists and researchers have noticed that most psychopaths and all serial killers have dead spots behind their eyes. This dead spot is an area of the brain where there is no activity. Kendra looks very concerned. So it is believed now that Degas had Stargardt's disease. So Stargardt's disease is a genetic eye condition that affects vision in the macula, which is the part of your eye that processes what you see right in front of you. And it's a central part of the retina that gives you clear and sharp central vision. And it causes you to lose, so Stargardt's causes you to lose your vision slowly over time. People with this disease have a fatty yellow substance called hyperfusion. Basically, it collects over the macula, and that's what makes you go blind. So Kiki was like pointing out like the study of how like all psychopaths, like serial killers, have like this dead spot behind their eyes, and there's a couple spots of your brain that are like right behind your eyes, and one of them is the frontal lobe, and the second one is the parietal lobe. So the frontal lobe is so the location is in the anterior or the front part of the brain, and its functions are decision making, problem solving, control of purposeful behaviors, consciousness, and emotions. And then the parietal lobe is right behind the frontal lobe, and its functions are it processes sensory information receives from the outside world, mainly relating to spatial sense and navigation. So like if these spots of the brain, if there's like a dead spot in it, you could kind of see how like serial killers like lose like some of their emotions, or like control of purposeful behaviors. So it kind of makes sense if this was a part of the brain that Degas, like if it started to go dark, because like not everyone with Stargardt's disease has problems with their brain. It's just like their eyes, but some do. So this was like maybe a thing that he had, maybe not. Maybe it was just his eyesight. We don't know for sure.
And then you got people like Logan Paul where they do a full-blown X-ray of his frontal lobe and it just looks like Swiss cheese, where all the areas of like empathy centers, and you're like, I can't say I'm surprised. Like,
I did not see that. That is
yeah. He got the
interesting.
X-rayed of his brain, and there are just certain shall we call them soft spots or non-functioning
spot?
parts
What is
of
this?
the empathetic variety up
Oh,
there.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot.
Unfortunately.
It makes too much sense. It explains a lot.
Hey Wanderers, editing Katrina here again. So Max messaged me after we ended the podcast. He wanted to make sure that he wasn't spreading misinformation about Logan Paul's brain scan. So there was some like darker spots on Logan Paul's brain scan, that is true. However, they're not holes or like completely dead spots. They're just spots of lower activity. So yeah, we just wanted to make sure we weren't like giving false information about him. And thank you again, Max, for clarifying that for us. And now back to regularly scheduled programming. Oh man, did you hear that he and Mr. Beast's Lunchly brand has now gone out of business?
It's gone out of business?
Yeah, there is too
I
many
heard there
report-
was mold or something. They're selling like mold to children to eat, right?
Well,
Come
not
get your
like-
mold.
It's not like
Mm.
handing the mold on like a golden platter, but like something either like in the manufacturing center like wasn't preserving the cheese right, or the seal wasn't tight enough on the packaging, or something went wrong. Yeah, there's like mold in basically like all the pizza kits and stuff.
I just like that his whole
Mm-hmm.
thing was with Prime was that it was healthy or some crap for you or something like
Not.
that. And then now they were selling just like Lunchables, which is, you know,
Lunchables
Mhm.
with more sodium,
plastic.
which
with
they
more
were saying was
sodium.
more nutritious because more sodium equals
More
more
sodium.
nutrition.
Yeah.
Wasn't there like less preservatives too? So that's why there's so much more sodium.
It's possible. I'm sure it
Okay.
was technically chemically different, but basically every doctor was like, different doesn't mean better. It just has more of different stuff in it.
Yeah,
Like no one should be
exactly.
eating this as their meals every day.
Oh god.
Yeah.
I don't know. Snake oil salesman, right?
There you
Mhm.
go. Beautiful description.
Working in snake oil, sometimes you
Scammer.
get bit.
Sometimes you get
Mhm.
bit.
You? All right. So now we're going to get into Degas' sculpture. So by the early 1880s, after returning from the States, Degas continued to expand his catalog of techniques and artworks. Many of these pieces included portraits and theater scenes, pastels of women at their toilet, and notorious criminals, and series of drawings and prints. So for some years, Degas had also been quietly exploring the medium of sculpture, using wax and other materials. He used a lot of like organic materials, so like what was it? It was like a bunch of like twine, like wax, and different stuff that he used to make his sculptures. So cork was another one too, and clay. I'll kind of explain why that's important in a little bit. So in 1880, he sculpted the little 14-year-old dancer. Critics were shocked by the 3-foot sculpture. They called it ugly and repulsive, and Degas had never publicly exhibited a sculpture before, and he never would again. So for the sculpture, Degas carefully molded wax, smoothing out the figure's skin, modeling the face, and even making fingernails on the hands. He added pigment to the wax to create flesh tones, and on some parts, like the pinkish lips, he painted them right onto the sculpture. Finally, Degas added the dancer's outfit, a manufactured cotton bodice that was tailored to the figure. He cut the shoulder straps to slip the bodice over the torso and covered it in a layer of beeswax to blend it in with the sculpture. To make the tutu, Degas layered cotton and silk netting or fabric. The figure also wears real linen ballet slippers altered to fit its feet. Degas painted them with pink-colored beeswax. The figure's hair is a braided wig of dark blonde human hair, also covered in wax. The final touch is a soft golden silk ribbon around the braid. So, a couple of things about the sculpture. So one of the things why I brought this up a little bit more in detail was because there was, a while ago, I didn't find anything of like actual matter in the sculptures, but there was a controversy not that long ago of when they x-rayed the sculpture that they found organic matter, and so people thought he put the body parts of his murder victims in the sculptures that he was doing. So that was a thing. I didn't find a lot on that, to be honest, but that was one of the theories around these sculptures. But he, like, say they found organic material, and he did use organic, like I said, wax, clay, cork, twine, hair. Yeah, so like there would be organic material in it, but it's not definably like organs. So yeah, but I think I remember seeing this like image in college, and it's always been very unsettling for me, this actual like sculpture. I don't know, it's always just given me like uncanny valley. It makes me uncomfortable.
I just think about Amy Adams dancing with it in Night at the Museum too.
I don't remember that. I should find
Amy Adams, she plays Amelia Earhart, and they're walking through the museum, and the Degas statue like curtsies to her, and she starts dancing with it.
Oh, maybe I do remember that. I don't remember it being this statue, but I remember like vaguely.
And Ben Stiller was ticked off because he wants to keep moving, and all Amy Adams wants to do is dance with the sculpture.
Interesting. Okay.
I just remember like the Jonas Brothers were little cherubs.
Yep.
That's all I remember from that.
Singing and My Heart Will Go On.
Yeah.
Oh no. Nice. Okay, another little brother, Frankie. He has a song named Cherub, and it plays at the store that I work at all the time.
Their brother sings now?
Yeah, Frankie. I think he calls himself like a sewer rat or something.
Oh,
he was like the opener, I think, for one of their shows, and he was like dressed up like it's a giant sewer rat.
I mean, to be fair, when you're like the kind of like the equivalent of like garnish on a burger plate for the Jonas Brothers, you gotta do something for yourself. So like if you're now Rat Boy, everyone's gonna remember that.
That's he's Scrappy due to their Scooby.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. He's just so much younger than them too, which makes it harder too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So in 1884, Degas reached the age of 50 and confessed to his friends that he felt some disillusionment about his career. Already known for his abrasiveness towards visitors during working hours, he became notorious for his single-minded dedication to the making of art and for his hostility to journalists and to the merely curious. So it is often said that as an artist, there is much to love about Degas. As a man, he was difficult to like. He once said, quote, "I want people to believe me wicked." End quote. But he wasn't necessarily evil. It was more that he just didn't like most humans. He was misogynistic and liked to argue, and he had a harsh wit and didn't hesitate to insult with it. When the Dreyfus Affair occurred, his anti-Semitic views came to the forefront, and he broke ties with his Jewish friends. He was very loud and proud about his anti-Jewish views.
The Dreyfus Affair is back.
It is.
Why can we not escape the Dreyfus Affair and Jack the Ripper every time the three of us are here? That was in my Tour de France episode.
Oh, yeah.
The Dreyfus Affair scandal. What the heck is going on?
Yeah. Yep. But if you remember back to like when like that writing was in chalk by the murder victim, it said that basically blamed the Jews for it. And so that's another reason why people think that Degas was the one that wrote it, because again, he had chalk, most likely had chalk with him, and he was very anti-Jew. So that's it. It could be nothing, but it could be something. It's one of those things. Yeah.
Kendra, you'll get your time to rebut.
She's just waiting patiently in the shadows.
In the shadows.
So Degas believed that the artist must live alone and his private life must remain unknown. Ill-tempered and withdrawn, and is in part due to his deteriorating eyesight, he grew ever more isolated. His once good friend Renoir stated, quote, "All his friends had to leave him. I was one of the last to go, but even I couldn't stay till the end." End quote. He remained a bachelor throughout his life and was not known to have any romantic entanglements. Manet noted that Degas was not capable of loving a woman, and Degas died in 1917, childless and alone. Which, in itself, that's not a bad thing. But that's another thing, too, like, as his eyesight deteriorated, he became more and more just, like, miserable and angry at the world, and more, like, hatred, especially towards women, which is another reason why they think that Degas was Jack the Ripper, because, again, he just didn't like women. He lost, like, the women that he worked with in the studio. They didn't want to come around anymore. He was just getting more and more miserable to work with. So, yeah.
He's like the bad ending of which composer lost his hearing? Was it Beethoven or Bach?
Yep.
It's
He's like the
Beethoven.
bad ending of that. Instead of just like,
Mhm.
I'm losing my hearing, so I'm just gonna keep making music and play deaf, versus like sort of like letting that embitter you to the point of like isolating yourself from everyone and like
Yeah.
just like sort of out of spite retiring from life, essentially.
Yeah, and I do feel bad that he did lose his vision, but part of his, like, nastiness, I guess, could have also been because of his brain, like, something going wrong with that, like, emotional stability kind of thing.
If that
turning off.
area in his brain was like dead.
If it was dying too, that could have accounted for some of that. So, yeah. So now we're going to get into Kiki's main points that she made in her TikTok and kind of hopefully make more sense of why Degas might be Jack. So in his early 50s, he started to show his hatred for women. So this is about when he started to lose his eyesight. He started degrading into being a horrible human to be around, partly due to his blindness. He was well connected, and he knew many wealthy and important people. He lived in Paris most of his life, and Paris is only a short train ride to London. It is said that he would often visit his friend Whistler, that lived in London, for lunch and take the train home again. So it's not like out of the realm of possibility that he would go into London for like a day and then just come back. So even if he like went there, committed a murder, and came back, that's not super unheard of, I guess. And he wouldn't be around the area to like be found. He took a trip for 2 weeks to southern France during the time of the double murder. During that time, he sent letters to all of his most famous friends, some that he had never sent a letter to, possibly to set up an alibi. In the letters, he would write out all of the pre-planned events that he said he was going to do, like go to plays or parties or whatever, possibly to set up an alibi. And the only letter that we have from him still like around was from this trip. And it said that he wrote more letters in this 2-week span than he had in the previous and in the future 5 years surrounding this trip. It is thought that Jack was a surgeon since he knew where organs were and where to cut the throat to kill instantly, and some wonder if he was not a surgeon, that he wasn't a surgeon since he didn't cut like a surgeon. So like, because he didn't have quite a steady hand, so like a lot of the cuts were pretty jagged. Degas would have had knowledge of human anatomy from studying in school for art, and yet he would have likely attended human dissections for school, possibly many times. He was also obsessive about knowing how the human body worked and how it moved. He compared women to horses many times. He also had he sculpted and like drew horses a lot. And he wanted to know every motion of women, just like he wanted to know the motions of horses and other animals. People tried to pin the double murder on Catherine Eddowes and Elizabeth Stride on Jewish people because of the graffiti. Degas was known as an anti-Semitist, very anti-Jew. He would often paint women in a way that they didn't look like they were watching. They were often like looking away from him. And Kiki points out that would fit Jack's MO. Jack targeted women and seemed to think very little of them. Also, at the time, ballerinas, the main focus of Degas' work, were very commonly prostituted out. Like, that's how they survived, basically. She points out that many of his paintings are women in vulnerable positions, not showing their faces, but showing their bodies, often painting the men in the paintings and dark shadows watching them. Also, like, either like the men usually in the paintings are like facing away, or the women, sorry, or their faces are like blurred. Another point she brings up is that Jack never sexually assaulted his victims, just killed and mutilated them. Degas never really cared for women in a sexual way either. He just wanted to know how their bodies moved and worked. And that's how she tied together those two. So yeah, Kendra, it is time for your rebuttal. Please.
I mean, I
I know, I'm putting you in the spot. I'm sorry.
It literally says he was, during the other time of the 2 murders, he was in the south of France.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're also saying that he took a train from Paris to London? But when did that's in like when did this happen? Late 1800s?
So
when did the Channel train actually open up, though?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because I don't think the Channel opens until like the 20s or something, like the 30s, 40s.
Let me look that up quick.
If it wasn't a train ride, it could have been a boat ride. I think,
it could be a ferry, but then it's like
because I think there's also like
evidence.
channel
You say
boats. I
train.
think channel boats.
Yeah.
Again, from the
But
documentary
a train.
Sherlock Holmes: Game of Shadows, you can take a ferry across from England to France.
Mhm.
Yeah, you
Well,
can.
That could have been. Yeah. So the Channel train didn't open until November 14th, 1994.
Unless
that's a different train.
I was really off. We're almost as old as that train. Jeez. Yeah, I mean, she doesn't really have. There's not really much to, argue with, because she doesn't really have anything other than hearsay, you know?
No, that's fair. No, like, I never, like...
Kendra, you have to do it right. You have to say objection hearsay multiple times.
Sorry.
To yourself as well. That's really good.
I mean, is it fun to, like, say, put that on him? I don't know. You get views, right?
Yeah, no, that's fair, yeah.
Yeah.
Here's my point, Kendra. Think about this. If he was trying to, like, if he was trying to, like, blame Jewish people with the graffiti, why would you write the Dear Boss letters? If you're, like, claiming, like, are you trying to, like, blame someone else or take the credit? Because the Dear Boss letters, people are like, these sound legit because of the details about the crimes. So what is the point of the graffiti at all? If you're trying to, like, you know what I mean? Like, are you trying to blame them, but then you're also taking credit?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like, what's the point of the graffiti? Is the graffiti attached to the crime at all? Could it have been there anyways?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just by happenstance? I don't know.
Yeah, that's like the confusing and frustrating thing too about this case is there's so many parts to it. You can spend literal weeks researching this.
Also,
and there's
also, like, she's saying that it can't be a doctor because the cuts weren't precise, but, like, couldn't it have been a doctor that liked to get, messed up and then go out there with,
yeah,
like, when you're drunk or on something, your precision, your hand-eye coordination goes to crap.
See, that's the other thing. Kendra, you bring up a brilliant point. He had failing eyesight, and he's wandering or stumbling about in the dark. There's, like, dark alleys lit by one gas lantern. The murderer, like Jack the Ripper, had to know where the cops were. He had to know where people were. You know what I mean?
I mean,
so,
like,
he was
if
in
your
France
eyesight
for the
sucks,
other two, for 2 of them.
I mean,
if your eyesight sucks, being a murderer and, like, getting away and, like, knowing what's going on, if you're trying to do that in the early morning hours and you're, like, blind as a bat, if you can't see directly what's in front of you, I feel like surgerizing people properly would be freaking hard.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I don't know too, like, how bad his eyesight got at that point. I don't know. Too, like, if it's dark too, like, you're mostly relying on, like, your sound to hear people around you and, like, your eyes to see in front of you. So that could have been, so, like, his eyesight wouldn't have been necessarily, like, the best thing, I guess, to, like, look out for people coming, I guess. I don't know.
And
here's Kendra, I take solace in this, okay? The Whitechapel murders stop, right? Either option A, it's a Whitechapel Brit who, again, serial killers aren't known to just stop what they're doing, especially after escalating like that. Either he's a Brit who died shortly afterwards. If the living conditions are as bad in Whitechapel, and if it was just a local loony and he dies, an unknown and anonymous, that's fine with me. If it was somebody from America or France who was the killer, we know that Edgar Degas is dead, and as far as we know, didn't murderize people in Paris. And we definitely know what the heck happened to H.H. Holmes. He got caught. He got killed for his crimes, whether it was the Whitechapel murders or not. The fact that, seemingly Jack the Ripper's reign of terror stopped at 5, theoretically, Katrina, I know that you said that there were other murders after that
Yeah,
like
there
bore
was.
some resemblance. But
Yeah.
see, to me, it would have to be unless the murders are worse than the final Whitechapel one, I don't think it's connected. It would have to be
Mhm.
worse than the last murder, which was literally like pulling someone apart. Like,
Yeah.
how do you get worse than that?
Than that.
Like that
Yeah.
murder scene would have to be
It
even
was
worse.
awful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of like, yeah, I agree. As far as like well-known like serial killers, I think H.H. Holmes is a better fit. Just because like he lives in a different country. So like it would make sense why they would stop in London, Whitechapel, and then like he'd go back and like it would end. And like he was starting a second murder castle too when he got caught.
Oh yes.
So I mean like he could have escalated and continued after that, but he got caught. But yeah, unless there's like something we don't know about, there
But this
could have
is a
been.
super interesting idea. Kudos to you for finding this TikTok, because I never, ever would have thought that there was some sort of connection between like.
There's not.
But there
Yeah,
are some things where if you line them up next to each other, that's an interesting thing about Degas
Okay.
I didn't know.
Mhm.
Here's Kathu, our dear friend,
Yes.
took a lot more studio art classes than Katrina and I had to.
Oh, absolutely.
She took their anatomy, like self-portrait, whatever, class where they had to learn a lot about anatomy and construct like muscular, like basically like a 3D human person out of
armature.
clay, like a little
Mhm.
armature person out of clay with like all this other stuff.
Mhm.
Okay, here's my theory.
Mm.
Kathu,
Is Jack
it's
the
a
Ripper.
time is Jack the Ripper. She did this. She carries around chalk. She likes to sketch, and
Kendra is so.
She took that one class. She gets a time machine. Yeah,
Kendra is so obsessed with protecting the name of Edgar Degas, she's willing to throw
Edward.
Kathu under the bus.
Edward. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
I just picture
I
Kathu.
just don't like. that
You'd
you're
rather
crazy.
Kathu be Jack the Ripper
No.
than the ballet man himself, Edward Degas.
No, not my sweet Kathu. No, not my sweet Kathu.
I don't think she could do that. Any of that.
No, Kathy would never, ever. Yeah.
I think it's funny though, because like
Edward
she
can take the fall instead.
she like had like an actual like was it, like 2 feet tall like armature
Yeah.
that was like looked like a muscle. She like sculpted all the muscles and stuff on him.
Yeah.
I just imagine her carrying that around everywhere. 'Cause she did. It's funny to me. It's creepy if
But
you
it's
think
like
about it.
my
It's
point is
funny.
like everybody that goes to art school that does studio art has to study human anatomy and how the body gets put together. It's just not, poor
it's
little
not like
Edward-
one person.
Edgar Degas did it. Just one person
Yeah,
did it.
I know. I
And
think the main thing is just like how close he was theoretically to the murders and like how his anger and like hatred towards humans, women especially, kind of escalated.
but like what was the evidence for that? Wouldn't like what's the definition that she's using of misogyny and hating women? Like wouldn't her definition probably fit 98% of men back then?
Probably, honestly.
So
It could be.
yeah,
It could depend.
so
it could depend on how.
it's just
It could
like,
depend on. It
the
could
whole
depend on
thing
how.
is just loose, like
It could
Yeah,
depend
it's
on
very
how
loose.
outspoken it was. Because back then, there's probably most of the dudes thought that way, but maybe Degas was like overt talking about like how much he hates them or thinks that they're lesser. So maybe it's just
I gotta see more evidence than that, than just saying like he was a misogynist. It's like, okay, but it's like 1800s. I'm pretty sure that people think most like people even were.
Yeah.
And he was anti-Semitic, and I'm like, okay, but like us doing this podcast and us having to do research, it was crazy how widespread anti-Semitism was back then, and popular it was too.
Yeah.
is actually a very interesting synchronicity. There's a video game in Fallout 4 that I played. There is an area that you can come across by just exploring. It's in a random house in a random area, and you open it up, and it is a murderer's art gallery.
Oh.
Ooh.
So it's like, I'm pretty sure it's like based off of some Lovecraft thing called like Pickman's Model or something like that, where this guy with sort of this psychosis starts sketching these frightening images where it turns out that the things that he's painting are like real, they're not fake. But basically this murderer guy in this building like sort of appears and reappears, but he's killed a bunch of like bad guys, like raiders. And I think like he like leaves you alone. I don't remember if you kill him or not, but like all of his artworks is sort of like crossing like Degas with Jack the Ripper. Like it's like a weird combination of the two. Like somebody fascinated with like human anatomy turning into like sort of like, so in the Dear Boss letters, how he was like, I was going to use the blood, but like it turned into glue. So like, I'm pretty sure this artist does like paint in blood. Like he's crazy. It's like a weird post-apocalypse painter, super artsy dude. But it's kind of interesting that character is like a weird synthesis of the two. Like it's an odd trope that shows up in a lot of things. There's a similar guy in BioShock 2 as well, who's like this crazed artist who's also a murderer. It's like this weird like character trait thing. It's weird.
It could have been Leonardo da Vinci, because he was an inventor. He actually would like steal bodies from graveyards and buy dead bodies, and like he loved that sort of thing. So inventor, I bet he did a time machine.
Forward in time?
Forward in time.
Oh.
Kiki, I bet you got another story.
There you go.
Another angle.
There was other like artists that they did try to like have as suspects for Jack the Ripper, so it's not just Degas. It's like there's other artists at the time.
It could have been Manet.
Could have been.
It could have been Renoir. It could have been.
I'm gonna push it off at Degas.
It might have been Manet because
anyone but Degas.
Kind of...
Yeah.
I like Manet more
Degas.
Though. So.
Yeah.
This was so much research. Good on you, Katrina.
This was so much research.
So much research.
Thank you. I hope it made sense. It was somewhat interesting to listen to, because I feel like with this much research, it's hard to like make it interesting enough for someone to like listen to it. So I hope it landed okay. I didn't bore you guys too much. But
nope. I even had the benefit of having the slides this time, so I was like,
you did.
Yes.
They help. They help a lot.
The slides help.
All right. Yeah, I should list some resources. I have a lot of resources. So I, of course, used Wikipedia. I used Britannica.com, JackTheRipperTours.com. They have a lot of interesting facts about Jack the Ripper. Casebook.org, Degas.org. I'll leave all the links to the resources in the description if you guys want to check out any of these things that I used. I also used FBI.gov to kind of look at the case file. That's actually interesting. They have like a 8-page case file of what they think happened with Jack the Ripper. It's different to hear somebody else's like more modern take on it from the 1980s. So yeah, well, I hope you enjoyed Spooktober 2024, Wanderers. Thank you so much to Max for joining us again and rounding out Spooktober. I hope you had fun. It didn't scare you too much.
I did. It's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
But good. We love having you on. All right, Wanderers, thank you so much for listening. If you have any ideas for future episodes, please feel free to email us at fwplisteners@gmail.com.
And as always, new episodes of the FWP are released to wherever you get your podcasts from, including this place that you are listening to right now, and edwarddegas.net, or the family of the Degas can send me my check, please, in the mail.
She defended your good name?
Yep, I defended
she did her due justice.
I did my due justice.
All right, Wanderers, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you guys next time. But a new theory has come to light, a theory that might just make sense. One that replaces Jack's name with one of a famous artist. One whose name is Edgar.
Edward!
I've been like messing that up all day. I've been reading it.
Edward Scissorhands.
Yes.
It's that famous artist, Edward Scissorhands.
Magic, yes.
Well, we're here at the police lineup. Who's up first on the list of potential people who cut up all those women? Well, first we have Edward Scissorhands. Get him out. Throw him in jail immediately.